As we heard, content localization is about so much more than just translating content into different languages. And there are so many factors to consider to ensure that you can connect with a global audience and make sure that your content really, really resonates. What we also heard in that session was the importance of having the right technology in place to enable true localization and also to facilitate growth and expansion with those localization capabilities. Because when you've got the right technology in place, you're able to scale efficiently into new markets and scale your business growth. And that's something you're going to hear a little bit more about now in an exclusive keynote. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage the publisher of Retail Technology Magazine, best-selling author, and all-round industry expert, Maya Knights.
Thank you so much, Beth. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's been brilliant sitting in the audience, being part of this, so thank you to Amplience for that. But even more than that, it's been amazing to be asked to speak, particularly to a bunch of practitioners like you. So from that perspective, I shall say straight away that I can't cut code and I can't configure a server, but I love to shop. And I've been doing it for a very, very long time. And so I think why the guys at Amplience asked me here was really just to make sure that we kind of take a step back. Remember that we're consumers and retailers and content producers all in one. And think about what's important today from a customer perspective, what separates the winners from the losers in terms of serving those customers and giving them what they want. So I don't want to talk to you about me. I hate that when people start talking about themselves, who am I, when they first come on stage. Let's dive straight in and talk about what has changed. I like to try and get all the audience on the same page in that regard in terms of what's changed. So I would suggest, can we all agree? Anyone dare to disagree? This is the biggest change in the world over the last 30 years. Digital, mobile, and the icons I use are meant to kind of demonstrate that, you know, when movies and maps and even finding a mate all go onto a device like this, it's a pretty seismic change. In fact, taking a step back, thinking about John's analogy with the Industrial Revolution, this is the fourth wave industrial revolution. And that's the world has gone digital, right? Amplience wouldn't exist without it, that's for sure. But bringing us up to date, I would suggest there's one problem that everybody in this room, retailers and the suppliers that serve them, is dealing with right now, and that's the after effects of this. And I would suggest that the major challenge summed up, whether you talk about speed, volume, velocity, veracity of data, content, the sheer explosion of requirements around serving customers digitally has led to the challenge of omni-channel profitability. Love it or loathe it as a term, if you serve customers across more than one channel, one thing I can tell you, and that's not me telling you this, this is Harvard Business Review research from pre-COVID times, is that customers that shop with you across more than one channel are worth 10% more per visit online and 4% more per visit in store. So these are your best customers. These are the customers you need to go after. But in terms of serving them online, the cost of goods sold, orders of magnitude of about 3 to 4 times more expensive than having them go into store. And this is where I love to say the grocers, yeah, post-COVID, you're loving it. I mean, your margins are razor thin, but now you've got me going in, scanning, bagging, de-tagging, and then taking my goods away. I do all of that, and that's when you make profit. That's when you break even. That's where you make your margin. And it's only after that you ask me if I'm a loyal customer, and they look a little bit red in the face, so that's my point. But omni-channel profitability is a huge issue. The other thing I think that's most important to point out is that change, with the evolution of digital, with technological advancement, has become the only constant, particularly post-COVID. A couple of hinky charts here. Hinky is in axes, but they're generally just to make the point, because stats, you can make stats say anything, right? But the point is, the green bar is 2012. The purple bar is 2022, midst of COVID. You can see how far we've come in just those 10 years. And the other thing I like to point out when I share this graphic, is where the UK is. Top. We're not top of many league tables anymore, but we are the most voracious online shoppers in the world. You could argue maybe China, maybe India bringing up the rear in terms of proportion of total retail sales that originate online, which is what this graph denotes. But come and talk to me afterwards about why we're such good omni-channel shoppers. But from a point of view of dense populations, identikit high streets, numbers of being inured to card not present, Germans still kind of have a problem wrapping their head around that. What do you mean I can't just send you an invoice? We have been miles ahead of what consumers are expecting of retailers for years. I remember speaking to an IT director about click and collect, and he went, well, I've basically got my store manager on the phone going, it's not coming out of my total. They've walked in and they've gone, I bought this online, here you are. And I can't take this. What are you going to do about it? And it was John Lewis, actually. They were the first ones to say, we're going to group online sales by postcode. You know, major strategic change, but simple enough that it kept both their store managers happy and us as customers, where we don't see the difference between the store on the high street and online, happy as well. So change has become the only constant, as reminding with the mask there for COVID. But then if we pick up the story from COVID times through to 2022, you can also see that what matters in retail actually hasn't changed that much. Someone far more clever than me actually said what matters in retail doesn't change, it's only our means of accessing it, which brings me back to my point about digital. People still want to know that the retailers that they give their money to see them as more than a cash-paying, one-time anonymous customer, particularly if you're a repeat purchaser. And here you can see that we all went mad for online, but it's slowly tapered off because we still love to shop in stores. We still want knowledgeable experts. We still want to touch and feel our goods. We still want to select our cuts of meat and see how yellow our bananas are. And so in that regard, change has become the only constant, but in that we have to make sure that we can stay attuned to what the customer wants. The customer wants, like I'm hearing more and more now, Gen Z, want that in-store experience. They're becoming more rats again. So I think we've heard this on stage already this morning, listening into what the customer wants, staying close to those trends and bearing in mind that they want some of the online experience, they want some of the store experience. In fact, they want the best of all worlds married together is absolutely key. So in that regard, I've spent a long time talking to retailers, talking to technology companies about what separates the winners from the losers. Wherever there's a major change, there are winners and there are losers. You can think about Kodak and Blockbuster, for example, as maybe some of the losers from a digital perspective. But I've observed, and I'm probably not telling you anything revolutionary here, that winners make a digital connection. But I would argue that retailers have been very good over the last 60, 70 years at connecting to places and to things. Places are their stores, things are their products, SKUs, barcodes, EPCs, JITINs, but they've not been very good at connecting to people. And this is where it starts to become really relevant to Amplience and anybody that uses Amplience, because if it's a remote, virtual, online, digitally enabled experience, it's probably powered by content too. Why do we care about making that digital connection? Well, thinking about, let's say, the digital connection that you have in the palm of your hand with a mobile, we already heard Mukta talking about clickstream activity. Every time we share, we engage and we interact, we create that digital connection with our customers. And they share a little bit more information back about who they are, where they are, what they're doing. And we use that digital connection, we should be using that digital connection to know your customers and figure out what they want. They're telling you what they want, they're clicking on it, they're putting it in their basket, although they're probably not converting as well as you might want them to be. But when they do that, what does go on to convert, what the stats and the data that we're all hoovering up tell us, is what, where, and when they want to buy what they want to buy. If they're clicking and collecting, they might want to buy from, we know what product they want, but we can see that they actually want to buy it in person. Being able to trace that journey, do they go into the fitting room? Do they actually, dwell at the shelf edge? We're not quite there yet, but we're definitely getting to the point about the what. What is it they want from me? And the when. And this is right time, right price, right product. Goes back to all of these tenets that we still stand by in retail, but now have to look through a digital lens with. But this is the key that I don't see enough retailers doing. They use all of that data, all of that engagement, but they don't bother to ask who those best customers are, to know your best customers, and then use that information to go out and find more like them. From a content perspective, you are pushing campaigns to lookalikes socially. So you are already looking to try and find more like them, but I think having a really clearly defined understanding of who my best customer is, what they want, how their needs might change throughout your customer lifetime is something that I don't see enough retailers doing, paying enough mind to. So the who, what, why, when, all of that is so, so important. And it is so much easier with digital. I mean, I worked for IDC for a while, and we did some really, really interesting research called Give to Get. And the more data we hoover up about consumers, the more they expect back in return. So, rounding up to where we've got to, know your best customers. They are so important. Beth kindly referenced a couple of books I've written. One was about Amazon, and the other one was about Tesco Clubcard. I was asked to write the book for Mr. Clubcard, the marketing director, who launched Clubcard back in 1995. And actually, Amazon IPO'd in 1995. And it was Tim Mason formerly of Tesco's, who went on to become deputy CEO of Tesco. And by the way, off the back of that Clubcard success, Terry Leahy and Tim Mason became the only two marketing executives that ever went on to lead a top tier one UK retailer ever. Never happened since. But he said, know who your best customers are, because when they launched Clubcard, and they bet the bank on Clubcard, about 40% of that year's marketing budget, the Pareto rule rang true. 40% of their customers were responsible for 60% of their sales. Know your best customers. Use that information to find more like them. And finally, use the information to run a better business, which comes back to the profitability challenge that I mentioned earlier, in terms of understanding how to introduce efficiencies, use technology to introduce efficiencies to bring down the cost of goods sold. So with that, let's move into the tech stack bit of my presentation, which is that I've also observed that winners orchestrate using data. And I was really, really heartened to hear this echoed on stage earlier in the panel, which is this. This, I've spent a long time, 27 years actually, in this business. And this is the definition of omnichannel. It's not hard in terms of defining it. It's really hard in terms of achieving it. But it is having a one single, accurate, as near to real-time view of three things, and that is your stock, your customers, and your sales. What am I selling? Who am I selling it to? And where am I selling it? Again, not rocket science, but the actual execution on that is really, really hard. Again, another learning about the data that you put in those three buckets that I took away from Clubcard, and also Amazon being another apex predator, both launched 30 years ago, by the way, 1995. Shows how long we've been living with this. You're using that data to connect with customers, to drive the engagement, to drive the response, to potentially drive the next best message. But you're then able to take that data and analyze it to gain some insight on who they are, right? What then happens in a lot of retailers is they go, well, that's nice to know, but what do you do with it? You have to have the mechanisms by which to act on the insight where it serves your best customers, helps you find more like them and run your business better. I think the Landmark Group fireside chat just now was a great example of that. And then particularly if you are a young, starting out, let's say, DTC brand, acquisition, customer acquisition is where it's at. But we all know post-COVID, the cost of acquiring customers is really, really, really expensive. So what you need to do is make sure that those actions drive loyalty. Offer them the next best message. If that, then this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about AI as well and where that what role that plays in your tech stack. But once you've got this principle embedded in your processes, whatever technology sit on top will hopefully only be in the service of the acronym that is DIAL. Nothing got done in Tesco's post-COVID without DIAL. Prove it. How's it going to drive loyalty? How's it going to drive repeat purchase and frequency for me? It might be, at this point, some people have come up to me afterwards and said, well, I'm a wedding dress retailer. Okay, you might not need loyalty, but you might need a referral scheme, right? Think about what data you're collecting as well. Does a shirt maker need to know my inside leg measurement? Sometimes there is that perception, creepy versus cool, that retailers are hoovering up data just in case they need it. If you're being laser focused, to Mukhtar's point about what data you're collecting and why you're collecting it, customers will respond. Tim said, when we launched Clubcard and we thanked customers for their continued custom, they opened their wallets to us even wider. This is what we want, right? Delivering on all of this requires a tech stack that basically sits in the headquarters, sits in the cloud. But one thing I think, and I hope it's relevant to most people here, that I think is missing is stores. Oh, stores are so 2008. Tim used to say, I take my phone out, ask Google where the nearest eggs are, it navigates me to the nearest eggs, I put it in the pocket as I walk in. Nowadays, as I said, you don't put your phone away, but you do all the work for the retailer. Where are they incentivizing you, helping you, using the mobile, if that's what you so wish to do? Stores need digital connections. They're a bit of a black hole at the moment, and I would suggest that you need to enable mobile in the hands of your customers and your experts to make over that experience and bring it up to the standards in terms of all the things that we expect and love online as well. Introduce digital. Why do you want to introduce digital? Borrowing from what we've learned for the last 25, 30 years online. Consumers are now looking for speed and convenience, right? If they need it. I should say here the point about friction. I really find discussions about friction a bit weird. Friction isn't a bad thing. Think about the Apple fanboy that will sit outside the Apple store for 3 or 4 days. In fact, there's a business. You take a setup camp and then you sell your spot to somebody or you pay somebody to queue for you. That's a value exchange that the Apple fanboy loves. It doesn't have to be all speed and all convenience. If I want to buy a £6,000 pair of trainers, I want white glove service. I want you to take your time. But speed and convenience is the major shift and change. So that's what you need to make sure that you're geared for, just in case that's what the customer also wants. Through digital, you can also expose far more range. You should use your content, as I think we've heard over and over and over again this morning, to prove its relevance to the customer. What matters doesn't change. When you think about search, browse, discovery, consideration, conversion, whatever stage of the shopping journey, all customers really want is for them to find what they want in the manner to which they want it. So I wouldn't say find it fast, find it easily. It's in the manner to which they want it. And it's up to you guys to infer that. If you're luxury and you're high touch, high volume, then maybe speed and convenience isn't the key. But if I'm grocery, high volume, low touch, low value, then yeah, help me build a shopping list, populate it really quickly and check out really, really fast. But making sure that experience and that content that you use to convey that experience is relevant is so key as well. And finally, I think this is where we're going. We haven't quite got there yet. Choice, yeah, bewildering amounts of choice, but then you help the customer filter it with what's relevant to them, but provenance as well. We heard a couple of discussions about compliance and regulation, and I'm seeing sustainability, corporate social responsibility, accessibility becoming very, very important. And I think what I'm seeing, for example, thinking about the John Lewis chat that we heard earlier, what they're doing with Nobody's Child and what Nobody's Child are doing with digital IDs and digital passports, exposing how much water, waste, transportation costs are being used to bring you the dress that you're wearing, for example. It's going to be a major differentiator in future. How? I've done a lot of talking about the what here. The tech stack bit is the how, right? And I said I don't cut code and can't configure a server. But what I have learned over the last 3 or 4 years is that winners are building composable technology stacks, with the speed of change being the only constant, with those multiple proliferation of channels and constant growth and change. Composable tech stacks seem to be distinguishing the winners from the losers at the moment. What does that mean? We've heard people talk about Mac or Mach, depending on where you come from. But it basically is this. It's microservices, application programming interfaces, cloud natively built, enabling headless commerce. Plug and play, hot swappable-ness. When you are specifying new technologies, if the technology vendor, regardless of whether they have AI in the name or in their strapline, has to be able to answer to this. I do a lot of work with the Mac Alliance. I find them a really great, open, non-profit advocacy group. Amplience is one of the earliest members. And they really have some amazing blueprints about how to put this stuff together. And in that regard, I'm really sorry. I judge awards, I do all sorts of things, but I wanted to talk about what good looks like in that regard. So I was at the third Mac Alliance end user conference earlier this year, where I was privileged to be asked to judge the Mac Awards. And we gave the best retail project at the Mac Impact Awards 2024 to Clark's. Huge legacy brand, right? But the reason why we gave them that award is because they literally changed the wheels and the engine on the plane while it was on the runway. They did it in a hugely short amount of time. They changed everything. If you ever want to see a best case example of how to future-proof your stack and do so at scale, internationally, online and in store at the same time, look up Clark's, Mac, and Muriel Neighbor. Muriel led this project. She was a very close run for our Mac Person of the Year as well. But essentially, let me just give you the list of vendors. It was Commerce Tools, Amplience, Akenio, Algolia, Event Streaming, MuleSoft, AWS, New Store, Adyen. I mean, Muriel flashed up a picture of what she called their Fisher-Price tills. Do you remember those? The big buttons with all the colours. All of that gone in the space of 8 months. All of it replatformed. And all of it pushed live with the ability to regress if anything went wrong. But just the sheer scale, it's actually the largest Mac implementation in Europe to date. And so I would suggest definitely checking that one out. And then the other one is a case study that's just been published on the Mac Alliance website that also involves Amplience, and that's Serena and Lily. And I think that's a really interesting one because that's more or less focusing not just on every facet of the content journey and the transactional journey, but also from a content perspective, they integrated Elastic Path for commerce, brought together those best of breed technologies, because we used to have this expansion and contraction. I want monolith, now I want best of breed. Hopefully, from an architectural standpoint, we've got to a point where we can have the best of both worlds. In fact, I heard the VP of engineering at IKEA put it very well. She said, we're never going to get rid of these stovepipe monoliths for sales and customers and for stock. So you've got your SAPs, you've got your Salesforces, and you've got your front ends as well. But what we want to do is to be able to bolt stuff on above and below for our end users internally, to be able to create that dial, virtuous wheel, and above to keep pace with what my customers want. So if you're using More to create winning digital connections, I would suggest, and actually I've been saying this for a long time, that retailers need to use digital to do a few things. They need to help us navigate our world, whether that's online, help me find what I'm looking for, or in store. But I like to think a new filter, a new way of thinking about this has been added today for me, because imagine the amount of content that's needed. Imagine planograms that then need to be loaded into AR systems that then need to integrate with your mobile app. But navigation, simple one. Convenience, I think we're all used to paying, the renaissance of the QR code, but using digital in that regard to make sure that you're making the experience as convenient as is necessary for the consumer, both online and in store, is absolutely key. Information, provenance, that's going to be more and more important, particularly from a competitive differentiation standpoint. This example, the convenience one is Whole Foods. Mobile payments. Information, I don't know if anyone remembers the ill-fated deposit scheme that our wonderful former government almost brought in and then abandoned. But this was a great case study, proof of concept between Ocado and a company called Polytag, where they printed QR codes on the plastic band around your milk bottles. And when you recycled your milk bottles, you got money back. But the interesting thing about that case study was essentially the tech wasn't hard, the QR code wasn't hard, the matching the SKU and where it was sold and so on wasn't hard. The really hard part was getting the QR code on the plastic band, going back to the manufacturers for that. But there's so many amazing things, I think, just from that example that you can start to take away and apply to your own businesses in terms of how can I use the product information that I'm printing on my products to enhance the customer journey, engage the customer more, particularly from an after-sales perspective. Inspiration, I love inspiration because that's a big one for Amplience in terms of content. We've got live streaming, we've got social commerce. I talk to the guys at TikTok Shop and they tell me the big brands just aren't ready for TikTok Shop. They're still locked into a 4 campaigns a year, no user-generated content. Everything's got to be slick. Everything's got to be signed off 20 times before it goes out the door. TikTok Shop is fast. It's organic. You can make a lot of money on it at the moment, even though they've just raised their commission rates. But inspiring your customers is going to be so important with digital, whether they're in-store or online. This is an example of Newegg in America, and they have quite a successful live streaming channel. Newegg is an electronics and computer retailer, and they have one of these crazy get it now, live streaming channel. Yeah, lots of. So you can imagine if this can be ported into so many different formats. And I also, when it comes to fashion, I also hear from a live streaming perspective that who you have selling a product can help shift huge amounts. Because if I know someone that looks in the right size for me, that I can trust that person, that it's finding the right product for me. And then finally, relevance. And I love this example. Zara's store mode in its app. This, to me, coalesces all the things that we've been talking about, which is knowing your best customers, finding more like them, running your business better with all the data that they share. And Zara introduced the store mode maybe about 18 months, 2 years ago. And essentially, the store mode asks you to nominate your 3 favorite stores, and you can get 1 hour click and collect in those stores. Brilliant. That's what's in it for me. I'm signing up. You've been transparent about why you want my data, why you want me to tell you all of this. But at the same time, as Zara, I now know you have my app, you're a super user. You have store mode. Where are your 3 favorite stores? Anticipatory shipping. I can actually get the products that I think you're going to want to those stores before you want them. And in terms of fast fashion, just better matching supply to demand is absolutely key. It's going to be absolutely necessary going forward. Touching upon where generative AI, I think, sits in all of this, I think John did a fabulous job, but I always like to just point out, he made the point that, we've had machine learning, if that then this, for 20, 25 years plus. And this is where we are now. We were at the descriptive, then the diagnostic stage, descriptive being literally product recommendations, which Amazon pioneered, diagnostic, we start to generate some results from the data of people interacting with those descriptive capabilities, predictive in terms of forecast modeling. Interesting, somebody said on stage, I forget who earlier this morning, in terms of like supply chain, for example, what supply chain COVID has done to supply chain is now for supply chain companies to create sort of battle books, battle plans. It was described to me by a product development guy very well. He said, the US has a battle plan for Sweden. They probably won't ever use it. They'll go into their battle plan room and they'll go, Sweden. But now, because COVID upset the time series-based data analysis that forecast modeling is based on, we're able to pull so many more bits of bigger data in with our time series data, which is basically our sales, and create battle plans. What if stores shut? What if stores shut here? What if a ship gets stuck there? And that is how I think we're going to start to improve use generative AI to improve the nature of our predictive systems. But where we are and where I think, again, it's interesting to see where the winners and the losers play out in this, is how quickly we allow ourselves to move from predictive to prescriptive, which is, just let it run. I'm going to go and talk to John about this in a minute because, are we going to manage by exception if we're creating content factories? I think that's what technologies help retailers do really, really well. But there's been so many examples of how more data can create a few pitfalls in that regard, in terms of revealing a bit too much about how much retailers know about us to us. Getting that fine line is going to be very, very important. But what I'm seeing is that there are 4 big buckets that generative AI is being used in and that you need to start thinking about adding into your tech stack. The first is marketing. And this is an example of a company called Dragonfly AI. They're working with a media agency called Octopus. And Dragonfly AI blow my mind. I do work with them, so if you'd like to find out a bit more, I can put you in touch with them. They've essentially codified the human brain and how we see things and what we notice first. There's bigger brains, far bigger academic brains, that can tell you exactly what that is. But they've codified it into a piece of software that you can point at any piece of creative and it will create a heat map for where most consumers will look first. So I'm seeing a lot of brands use it on the fly as they're filming adverts, as they're creating. And this is the mobile app version, but you can push it through a web version as well, if it's sort of flat, static assets, content assets as well. But marketing, that's a really great example of where generative AI is helping there. Merchandising. I don't want to step on Ampliance's toes here because I think they're doing a great job already. But this is a really basic example. I think, I'm seeing a lot of generative AI use cases where we're just automating one really small thing. Rather than the monoliths which went really broad and tried to be everything to everyone, AI systems, particularly these little startups, will spend a long time going really, really deep into one particular thing. And Mad Street Den creates ViewTag, and they've helped Diesel go out onto the internet, find out what tags are most relevant and rank best to what relates to their product descriptions, marry the two, automate tagging, make sure that your SEO is as good as it possibly can be. The orderly assistant, that's a computer vision example where we're using the cameras in the store ceilings to then marry with your workforce management and task management systems and create scoreboards, score sheets for your managers. Are you improving against the baseline input from the retailer about how they want their stores to look and feel? And then finally, empowering your store associates, empowering your contact center operatives as well. This is an example from Tractor Supply store, and they've basically taken all the knowledge base, all that content that sits behind the scenes. And I suppose it's a bit like that John Lewis example, but reversed, right? If you are a customer and you go into a Tractor Supply store, you approach a store associate, they can use natural language processing, voice assistants to query the knowledge tool. And the knowledge tool will go out find an answer and give it back to the store associate for them to share it with you. The only other thing I would say in this regard is I'm seeing from a tech stack perspective, AWS probably aren't going to like this, but when you are pinging back and forth so many queries to the cloud, AI-based queries, interesting what John was saying about at the edge, because that can become very, very expensive. So I think we're also going to have to go through a stage in terms of your tech stack where things are cached at the edge more and more. The more you rely on live data going back and forth between the cloud, the more expensive it becomes, right? So with that, I'm going to draw to a close because I probably kept you a little bit longer than I was supposed to, so apologies for that. But hopefully it's just given you a chance to coalesce some of the thoughts you've had. Don't forget the why am I here, the how, the what, and the why. And digital and your tech stack should exist today to help you optimize how you sell what you sell, to help you understand who you are selling to. That's probably should be top. That's the most important thing, who you are selling to, because they are responsible for the reason that you're here. And then once you know these things, update when and where you sell. I think this is a bit like painting the fourth bridge, right? You never stop. But if we're going to draw a baseline post-COVID in terms of where we are with digital, where we are with content, updating when and where you sell is hugely important. We heard about mobile commerce and social commerce growing exponentially. And then finally, I think, I don't know if this is actually something that a lot of retailers do, but they don't tend to use the data to refine what they sell. Asking the customer, we've seen lots of case studies, use cases where that's the case, but actually pouring that data back in to reduce ranges, be much more laser focused in terms of new product development is absolutely key. And I would say thank you so much for that, especially as my Barbie core plus Brat Green fits with the branding today. That was not planned, but I was very pleased. But if you want to say hi to me, that's my LinkedIn QR code. Please come and chat to me afterwards if you can catch me. But hopefully that's given you some food for thought. And with that, thank you.